apostles or Paul's brethren preaching another gospel out there, and they were teaching these things that weren't vibing with what Jesus had said. And the people that we've seen, if you read over, you'll find out that people they began to just do things just for the money. They wouldn't do it without doing it for the money. And they began to treat these people as foolish people. And Paul asked them, have I done you like this? Have I treated you like that? But yet you treat me like this, but you don't, the ones who have mistreated you, you want to oblige. And you know, that's how it is sometimes within the church. There's sometimes, a lot of times, that the people that are mistreating the church, the people are more willing to do things for them. But the ones who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the church will tremble all over them and not think anything about them. You know, and that's a sad thing to see this in the brotherhood. But this really happens when you have some that are doing everything in the world they can for the church, and the church just walks over. But then when that one wolf in sheep clothing walk in with the nice words and everything, everybody falls all over them, smiling face, and don't think nothing else about it. But you see, I wonder why preachers like that, like of Paul, that don't say nothing. It's because Paul ain't going to complain about what you didn't give him. Paul wouldn't complain about what you did not do for him. Why? Because he wasn't depending on you, but he was depending on God's grace being enough to get him through the trials and tribulations. And that's the thing about it is, as Christians, we need to learn to lean on this sufficient grace that we can get from God. And it's not that we're going to have all these other things in the world. It's not that we're going to have the big, gigantic churches. It's not that we're going to have the plush cars and the plush life. But it's about how we function through our weaknesses. You see, God can use our weakness, church. If you look at the biblical narrative, God always works through a weak man. God worked through Moses and his weaknesses. And look what he did. It wasn't Moses who was made strong, but it was God that everybody started looking at. Because God worked through a weak, feeble-minded man by the name of Moses to deliver his people. Not only did he work by Moses, he worked through Joshua to get him in the land. And once in the land, he worked through feeble-minded judges like Samson, like Gideon, like Deborah. He worked through those people to have his will be brought to the man. God worked through men called prophets who did not know everything, but they worked by God's grace to do the job they had to do. It wasn't their words that were being said, but God's words. And at times you look up, and these prophets weren't really men of stature. Like there was one, I believe his name is Angus. He was a sycamore tree, took care of sycamore trees and was a shepherd out of Cowan. And when it came to him, the professional priest came to him. He said, hey, I didn't even want to do this, but God told me to come. What else can I do? He says, I take care of sycamore trees, and I'm a shepherd. I'm not a professional prophet. I haven't been taught the Torah like you have, but I must say what God has told me to say. And that's a time, as Christians, we must do the same thing. You may not have a degree or education in Bible, but you to take the sense that God has given you and let God work through your weakness. Right. You let him work through the weakness of humanity, and God can do some marvelous things in his life. Because through Paul, look at what he did. You see, Paul had a lot of stuff going against him. And number one was this man was a murderer of those in the way, of those in the church. He was a killer of those people. But as you see, through God's grace, he took care of that weak point. The people were able to listen to him despite he had murdered brothers and sisters in the past. People were able to look past that and see the message that was given through him. Because Paul trusted in God. He realized that even from his own people, he had been in danger. He was in danger from the Gentiles. He was in danger from everything around him. But he realized there was only one person he could trust in, one thing, and that was God. And I believe Brother Keeble a long time ago said the same thing. He said that, they said, Brother Keeble, how did you do all that you did in your lifetime? And Brother Keeble looked up and he said, well, white folks didn't like me because of the color of my skin. He said, my own black people didn't like me because of the church I attended. He said, son, I ask you, who else did I have but God? You see, we're going to go through things in this life, church. We're not going to be immune to shipwrecks in life. We're not going to be immune to being flogged at times. And I'm sick and tired of people on TVs telling folks this lie of what Christianity is about. Telling people that, oh, come on to Jesus and everything's just going to be all right. That's not the story I find in the Bible. Things will get better, but things will get a whole lot worse before they get better when you're coming into the Lord. You know, the people have been telling folks that it's all right, come on in, give me all your money, and God's sending you a blessing. That's not how it works. That's not how it works, church. It don't go that way all the time. You see, we got these people depending on works-based blessings in churches. But it's not about the work you do. I said, if that was the case, if it was about the work and all the good you did, why was Paul going through all these shipwrecks in life? Why was Paul getting beat up so many times? Why was he getting stoned? It was all about being good. If this was true, why don't we see it with the Apostle Paul? You see, a lot of these things that have been taught today ain't biblical truths anymore. They're teaching people that, oh, it's going to be roses spraying up everywhere you go, and you ain't going to have to suffer. You're going to suffer. It's a whole suffering is a pinnacle about being a Christian. Because Jesus told us that we're going to suffer for his name's sake. He told us they're not going to like us because you love me. They're going to drag you from your homes into judgment halls because you believe in me. But he said, I'm not leaving you alone. I'm sending my spirit to be a counselor, to be the advocate for me. And this spirit hadn't left him alone because when Paul was going through what we read in chapter 11, all of these hardships, when he was hungry, when he was thirsty, when he was out there naked, when he was trapped on the open sea, all he had to depend on was God. There wasn't no man around that could help him. There wasn't nobody, a boat coming by that could pull him out of his water. But he had to wait till he was washed up on the land. And who persevered him through all this? It wasn't by his own power, but it was by God's grace being enough. Sometimes we get in these down spirals in life. We think we have to do something. We think we have to do something to get God to do something. Well, I'm going to tell you this morning, it's not about what you do. It's not about what you do when you're in that situation. Some people say, well, I'm going to pray a whole lot more. It ain't about you just praying a whole lot more. It's not about what you do. Because God's going to work his job in due time. He's going to do what he's going to do. All that I can tell us to do as Christians is continue to trust. Continue to walk in the way you know is right, is in Christ. Don't start changing things because you got a bad day. Or things just ain't going right. Continue to trust in the same God that was there before that day went bad. Trust in him. Then we can understand what he's talking about when he says, when all these things begin to happen, you want it to go away so quick, don't you? You want the pain to cease. The pain ain't going to always just stop instantly. It's not going to do that. Sometimes it's going to linger with us. Sometimes it's going to go on and on. But church, that's just another part of our weakened condition. Why? Because we live in something we call a corruptible body. But through this body and through our weaknesses, God's grace will be shown to be complete and perfect. Why? Because when God's grace is enough for you, even in your pain, in your miseries, you're going to find a way to smile. When God's grace is enough for you, even in your shipwreck days, you're going to find a reason to rejoice on God that saved you. Testify. You see, when God's grace is enough for you, you ain't out there trying to find something else. Trying to find something else to do other than God's grace. Because God's grace, his favor, the thought and knowing that he's there with you gets us through a lot of things, church. I know when I had that fire, I had the thought that God had been with me, I would have fainted that day. But just a mere thought that God is with me got me through all the things that had to come. When I got to the stage in time when I was feeling defeated in life, the thing that got me through was knowing one thing. I may be disoriented right now. Things may be clouded in my life. I may not see the works of God, but I know one thing. He has not left me alone. I know he's still here. but God was there. You see, you ain't going to always be able to see God the way you want to see him. Because at times, things that we do may block our sight. At times, we may become blind to what God may want us to do. But we must remember one thing, church. We've got to continue to trust. We got to understand that we did not make ourselves, nor do we know how to mend or fix ourselves. Doctors can only take you so far. Right. Psychologists can only go part of the way down that road. A psychiatrist can only prescribe so much medicine, but only God can take care of all of our ailments and all of our diseases. Why? Because God's grace is sufficient. Even when your heart is broken and you're feeling all alone, trust in God's grace. What I mean by saying about trusting in God's grace is know that you're not alone. Know that when everybody else has left you alone, God is still there. Why? Because he's made us a promise.
Come on.
He said, I'll never leave you, nor will I forsake you.
That's good.
And I believe it, because David even said to himself,